Hello and welcome back to another episode of Lessons in Product Management. I'm your host, John Fontenot, and on today's episode, we're going to talk about another controversial topic. Is Gen AI taking over or consolidating the roles of product manager and UX designer? That's the topic for today, and we're going to dive right in. So, if you think about the two roles of product manager and UX designer, there's kind of a Venn diagram of sorts where you can see overlap, and I believe there should be, because that creates a really good partnership between product managers and UX designers. So some of the things that are unique to a product manager is typically the PMs are responsible for, connecting product development and things that are prioritized, like what problems are you going to solve, what opportunities are you going to chase, based on what's the business objectives and the business strategy, right? So you take kind of the opportunity space and you prioritize it to maximize business outcomes, right? That's uniquely part of the PM's job. And that translates into a roadmap, that translates into stakeholder management and alignment, and facilitating go-to-market. So those are all things that are pretty unique to the PM, but all kind of hinges on that foundation of how do we connect the problem and opportunity space to the business objectives of the broader organization. Okay. And then on the user experience side, there's things that are pretty skill specific to a UX professional, right? Like information architecture, styling, colors, typography, micro interactions, interaction design, even prototyping, even though I think PMs are getting a little bit more used to doing prototyping, especially now in the world of Gen AI, but not to give too much away, right? We're getting there. But look at the overlap, right? When you look at overlap, market research is done by everyone: product marketers, UX designers, PMs. Like there's a lot of hands in that cookie jar. Customer research, same thing. Marketing, product marketing, PM, UX. Customer research definitely overlaps. Ideation on solutions, mock-ups, building user flows, testing designs, and actually defining what the solution is going to be. That's all a team effort. So those are things that overlap already. Okay, so the question is, if Gen AI makes us so much more efficient, do you need both roles? I would argue yes. And this is primarily why. In my experience, UX designers are grossly underutilized. A lot of companies still treat UX designers as visual designers or pixel pushers or the people who make things pretty. And I've been in organizations where there's one UX designer and there's 6 to 8 product managers. So what happens? The UX designer only has time to do visual design. Because how are you going to do deep customer discovery and get into the data and do solution testing when you have that many products to worry about or that many areas of the product to worry about? You can't do any deep strategic work as a UX designer. You're not anywhere close to a full stack designer. So what happens to the customer research? The PM has to do it. What happens to usability testing? The PM has to do it. What happens to the stuff that maybe a UX researcher would do? PM has to do it. And does the PM have time for it all? Well, we either make time for it or the job just doesn't get done. And we see suboptimal results as a result of it. So what I would love to see is that Gen AI makes us so efficient that now the PM can focus on, instead of the mundane task, can focus on the more strategic, deep thinking work. And same thing for the UX professional. They can focus on all the things that they want to do, all the skills that they want to be able to show that they have and be able to practice and exercise. I hope that Gen AI makes us so efficient that we're given the space and the time to do those things to drive better outcomes for our business. But, in the world that we live in, especially now in the economic environment that we're in, where profitability is so important, and then you look at kind of outside of the VC-backed high growth startup space, and you look at like the private equity space where profitability is a big deal. And instead of grow at all costs, it's like, hey, let's see if we can find sustainable growth, but we have to remain profitable, and we need to be able to show this to the board. Those are the situations where I found myself, where I was doing a ton of the design work because there was one designer. And a lot of the other PMs had no design background. I spent a little time in UX research. I've done a lot of UX design courses, and I've practiced it a lot. I stay in Figma quite a bit. And if you have a design library, if you have a component library, a design system, it's not super difficult for a PM to jump in and like grab components and even look at analog examples that are in the market and put something together, right? Is it going to be as great as somebody who's a seasoned UX professional? Maybe not. But if the patterns are similar, it's not hard to make another pop-up modal that looks like the other pop-up modal that was already created, right? As an example. So that's where I think, I'll get to this in a second, but I think PMs need to develop some UX skills. But let's go back to what we were talking about just a second ago. I think there's a definite fork in the road because there will be companies who see this as an opportunity to further consolidate, to say, oh, well, if AI can create visual designs, why do we need designers? Because they already don't understand the value of design, right? It's not just visual design and pixels. And so I think that's actually a threat in a lot of companies to the UX profession, is still having the same leaders that we have today with the same backwards understanding or misunderstanding of UX. That's going to push a lot of UX jobs out, and the PM is going to be expected to do it because Gen AI can do it for you, right? So that's what I think is a problem that could occur, and that all the efficiency gains we get from Gen AI as a PM get pushed off into other responsibilities of having to take on the UX role officially now, even though unofficially we've had to in some companies already. So that's one eventuality I see, where UX design responsibilities shift to the PM. But again, like I said, I hope UX professionals get the space to become full stack, and then the partnership can just be more efficient and effective, and we drive better business outcomes through the efficiency gains we get in Gen AI. But I also see, and this is kind of a warning to all PMs out there, I've worked with some fantastic UX designers who care about the business, they're meeting with stakeholders, they're doing all the right things, and they ask the right questions, they challenge me on strategy and why are we doing this, and they think like a product manager. They're not afraid to talk to obviously customers, but they're not afraid to talk to stakeholders and engage and debate. And it's like, if you make these UX professionals a little more efficient in some of the mundane execution work they have to do, and they can spend more time working with stakeholders, focusing on strategy, practicing their prioritization skills, and then they still have the UX expertise that they do, why do we need a PM? I think that is, in some cases, whether they change the title of the former UX designer to product manager and then just consolidate the responsibilities, I think there's a reality where some PMs who are, complacent and just sitting back and saying, you know what, I'll build a roadmap, I'll write specs, I'll write Jira tickets, and it's just like the delivery aspect of execution, and that's all you're doing, you might not have a job soon. And when I say soon, it might be a year, it might be 3 years. But when leaders of organizations catch on to the level of competency that some of these UX designers have, and they see how much more efficient the role could be, and they start thinking, should we keep this person who just writes Jira tickets, because that's all they do, or the person who's actually like designing and bringing this thing to life, can't they just figure out prioritization? Right. And of course, I'm grossly oversimplifying, but that's the reality, is that our leadership, this current generation of leaders, the majority of them don't get it in these big companies, right? They don't understand how the discipline of product building should function. And so these threats are a reality that I think you should hedge for. So what would be my recommendation to UX professionals? Make space today to practice your full stack UX skills. Leverage the efficiency gains you can get from Gen AI, embrace it, and get more involved in the business if you're not already. And to PMs, it's go figure out user experience. There's tons of courses. Talk to your UX design partners. read, go figure it out. That's all I'm saying. Like, I take tons of courses. Interaction Design Foundation has some great courses. You can get a year subscription for like $150 or something. And there's tons of articles. There's a lot of great stuff. So if you're a PM, one, make sure that you're doing the full breadth of the PM role and not just writing JIRA tickets, right? Your job should be a lot more than that. But you should also be thinking, how can I practice my customer interviewing skills? How do I develop skills in product testing and design testing? How do I get into Figma and actually use the component library we have to mock stuff up? Right? This was my favorite thing even early on, was when we had one designer, we had like 6 PMs. This was my first PM job ever. I joined the team as a UX researcher and then transitioned from there into full-time PM. And one of my favorite things ever was, hey, empathy, right? I empathize with my designer who has to design for like 5 different products for 6 different PMs. And they're spread really thin, and they're trying to do the right thing. They're trying to talk to customers, gather feedback, do different design iterations, do testing, and they just didn't have time. So to help them out, I would build mock-ups. I would take the component library we had. I'd put stuff together as, quickly, but as well as I could. And a lot of times I get good feedback. Sometimes I got, this is horrible and this is why. And I learned from that, but they appreciated it because the intent wasn't to take over their job. The intent was to help accelerate their workflow and to use it as a means of visual communication to collaborate on potential solutions, right? And then they could see what was in my head because I was able to get what was in my head out onto paper. And they appreciated that more than just me trying to articulate it or write a detailed spec document, right? So worst case scenario, well, there's a few worst case scenarios. The first worst case scenario is you become a better partner to your UX counterpart, right? So in the perfect world, UX gets to be full stack. The current leadership we have has a revelation about how products should be done and gives us the space to actually do and practice our discipline, practice our craft the way that we know that we should. And we become a better partner because now we can speak their language. We can collaborate with them more effectively. That's a good thing. There's a few more, right? Your UX counterpart could see you picking up responsibilities that they think that they should have, and that forces them to kind of step their game up if they're kind of slacking. So that's another thing. But you also future-proof your career through skill development, which is never a bad thing. The more skills you acquire, the more valuable you become. And then the last one, if your UX partner wants to go on vacation and you guys are super swamped, super busy, but they've had this vacation planned forever, we're people, we have families, we should be able to do that. And your UX partner should feel confident that you have their back and that you have the skills to adequately step in and help out if something comes up or if something needs to be finished, right? So there's really no harm in taking the next step and up-leveling, cross-skilling your abilities and making yourself more valuable to your team, to your company, to your career, and therefore your family or yourself if you're single. But for those of us who have families, it's like that's my big driving force, is like, how do I make sure that I'm not put in a position to not be able to provide for them? And so that's if you're in that situation too, you should take it upon yourself to take that role seriously and make sure that you're future-proofing your career and your ability to provide for your family. So not to end on a somber note, that hopefully that's an encouraging and a real thought for you to take away with this. But I don't mean for this to be doom and gloom. I really hope that this is a call to action for you to up-level your career, grow your skill set, and become a more valuable asset to the organizations you work for, or maybe your own thing someday. So that's it for today. Thank you for joining me for this lesson in product management. Go out there, get you some UX skills, and let me know in the comments what you're working on. We'd love to hear what kind of skill development you're working on. And if you want any advice or things that I've learned over time of like, where do I start? Like, how do I get started with this UX thing? Drop me a comment. I'll share some advice. And maybe for your particular circumstance too. Happy to collaborate and help in your kind of skill development journey. So again, thanks for joining me today, and I'll see you next week on Lessons in Product Management.